This is Ms. Callahan with a quick overview of ecology for the EOC for biology. First thing I'm going to go over is just a couple of key terms that we went over in ecology. Please remember that bio means living. So biotic means living things, living factors that affect living things. Let me rephrase that. In other words, other people that are around you are biotic factors in your life. The grass is a biotic factor in your life. And the deer that maybe hit your car or something like that would be a biotic factor in your life. But if we put an A in front of it, remember anytime you put an A in front of a word, that means not or non. So abiotic means non-living. So for example, the weather today, maybe that affected you in some way. That would be an abiotic factor. You are a student, and as a student, you have the role or the niche. Please remember that word. In other words, that is your job. Other organisms in the environment have different types of niches, and it's not very good for you to have the same niche because you're going to have competition. You also have symbiosis, and there's two types. There's mutualistic, which both benefit. For example, your sea anemone and your crab. So the sea anemone pretty much gives camouflage and protection through stinging for the crab, and the crab, as it eats, provides food for the sea anemone. That's mutualistic. Parasitism is when you have something like a tapeworm and it harms you. And usually parasites will keep their host alive for a period of time. We also have other factors or other relationships, such as competition, where you're both competing for the same resource, which may be food. Most of the time it is food. And then you also have predator-prey. The difference between parasitism and predator-prey is that predators eat their prey right away. We also talked about producers, which is your plants. They are at the bottom of your lovely trophic pyramid or your ecology pyramid. They would be down here. And remember, each one of these is a trophic level. There's only 10% that is actually passed on energy-wise to each trophic level. 90% is lost as heat to each level. The rest of these levels would be your consumers. In other words, we are a consumer, so we would be a good example. We are omnivores, meaning we eat everything. But you could also have carnivores in here, which eat meat, or herbivores, which eat plants. Another example of omnivore would be a bear. I also want to go over exponential and logistic growth. Exponential is when you have unlimited resources. So you're going to have this, J shape is what we call it, but, it kind of doesn't look like a J to me, but... And then you have logistic. Logistic can be added on to this, so maybe this population started out in exponential growth here, but now it's in logistic growth because we've reached a carrying capacity or the maximum limit for our population, our ecosystem or environment. So, for example, if I get on an elevator and the maximum capacity is 10 people, maybe I start off as one person on there, so I'm in exponential growth, and another person gets on, another person gets on, another person gets on, and finally we reach that 10 capacity, then we're going to level out. That's all we can do on the elevator. Hopefully we won't get any more on there because I don't want to be stuck in the elevator. So that would reach our logistic growth or our carrying capacity, the maximum number of people that can be in that elevator. Also, going back to our plants, please remember that they are called producers, but they're also called autotrophs. Remember, we talked about autotrophs. Autotrophs means that they can produce their own food. So remember I told you this was trophic levels, and the word trophic means food. So if I'm autotrophic, that means I can make my own food. If I'm heterotrophic, that means I can't. So a good example of heterotrophs would be us as well. We then talked about gymnosperms. Gymnosperms, I always think of a cone, and I'm running around it. And guess where I'm running around in? I'm in the gym. So, gymnosperms is cone-bearing plants. So for example, pine trees. Angiosperm is your plants that produce flowers, and I always think of Angie having flowers. We also talked about xylem and phloem. Xylem is found in the roots, and it takes up your water, and it takes it to the rest of the plant. Phloem is found in all of the plant, but it takes the sugar from the leaves down to the rest of the plant. Please remember that most of your chloroplast is going to be found in your leaves. That's the reason why they are green, and that they are going to take in sunlight and produce glucose, which is sugar or a carbohydrate, and the phloem is going to take it to the rest of the plant, so because the rest of the plant needs that sugar too. Another thing that we talked about was innate behavior. Innate behavior is something you're born with, like hibernation. In other words, these organisms are born and then they already have this natural gift of whatever it is. So for example, turtles usually come back to the same place that they were born. That's innate behavior. Then we had learned behavior, which is you learning to do something, like me writing here. That's a learned behavior. Social behavior is, well, I mean, you're probably thinking about getting on Facebook right now. That's kind of a social behavior. But in the natural world, it is things like being territorial. So like lions, they have a 50-mile radius around them, and they don't like other male lions to be in that radius, or they fight. So that will be a social behavior. We went over the 3 R's in ecology, and the 3 R's is reduce, reuse, recycle, and these are sustainable practices. And sustainability means keeping the environment good for future generations. We went over global warming, and that's where we're burning fossil fuels, and these fossil fuels are producing carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is normally released in our environment through other things like decomposition and cellular respiration and stuff like that. And usually our environment can keep up with this through what we call the carbon cycle. And the carbon cycle keeps up with the supply of carbon and makes sure that there's an equal supply of carbon in our atmosphere as well as on Earth. And what this carbon does in our atmosphere is store the heat from the sun. A simplified version of it. But it stores the heat from the sun, and it helps us, our lovely Earth, maintain, average temperatures. In other words, we don't go to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and we don't go to below, 200 degrees below zero. So we maintain a really good temperature for organisms to live and thrive. And that's all due to the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is good, but if there's too much of it, you can get this increase in temperatures, which leads to a decrease in biodiversity. In other words, we're going to get a limited number of organisms that can survive in this heat that we are providing for them. And like I said, if you hear global warming, you should think of burning fossil fuels or deforestation. Because remember, when we destroy these trees, these plants, they contain CO2, and when they are cut down, they release this CO2. Also, they have the same amount of biomass up underneath them as they do up here, and we leave this behind to decompose, and that's also releasing greenhouse gases. So that's all for ecology.